and a couple of the other sports is I think the salary cap makes it much more fair from a competition standpoint for teams to, sort of reload and be competitive in the short amount of time.
And with that, I want to ask, because you bring up a good point there with the salary cap, with MLB not having one. Yeah. Do we see that? Because we see the contracts and the, amount of, the money that these players are getting. We just saw, Fernando, that these over $300 million for 14 years. And as these contracts increase over time, do you see or foresee that MLB at one point will probably implement a salary cap?
I think the players' union is far too strong in baseball, unlike in football or basketball or hockey for that matter. The players' union in baseball has always been by far the single strongest, arguably, union in the United States of America. And I just don't see them ever going along with that idea. They have their reasons. And, it doesn't matter which side of the fence you fall down on. I think we all agree that if we were, had a chance to make as much money as we possibly could out there, all of us would love that idea. But at the same time, I still believe that the game is in a lot of trouble from a fiscal standpoint, because unlike football, the TV revenue money will start to decrease from a local level in baseball. Look, the numbers, the ratings in baseball, they're pretty eye-opening about, in a downward trend. A big baseball executive said to me during the season last year that they really believe, and I think it's probably going to happen next year, they really believe that there is going to have to be a total shutdown of the game for an extended period of time for them being the owners to get to a point where they feel like it's worth having a team. Now you can make the argument, and you would be correct in that, somebody says, well, wait a minute now, these guys are buying teams for $100 and they're selling them for $500. Okay. I'm saying it could be, $200 million and they sell it for $700 million. But I'm saying that is true and it has happened. But I don't know how much money a lot of these teams are really making at the end of the year compared to what they're spending. I'm saying they probably make some money, but they don't make money like football makes money, not even in the same galaxy. And football has controlled costs with a salary cap.
Thom, with the MLB, the fiscal issues you talk about, the relationship between the league and the union and its players, we all know that's not been rosy the last couple of seasons. Yeah. And now with the collective bargaining agreement coming up in December, yeah. How do you think this gnashing of teeth between the league and the players and the union, how do you think that's going to affect the CBA once December comes around?
Well, I'm generally a very optimistic guy about most things in life. I am not optimistic about this CBA in any form or fashion. This has been building up over the last number of years. I think the players would say that the owners have finally figured out a way to avoid paying players what the players feel like they deserve to make. Because look, when salary arbitration started, I think we all agree that, and again, look, I don't have a problem with anybody making as much money as they can possibly make. I'm all for it. You want to, Joanna wants to, everybody wants to, I do. But when you see a guy that's making $700,000 and he's in his second year or third year, and then all of a sudden he hits 230, strikes out 180 times, his numbers are really not all that good. And all of a sudden his salary jumps to $3.5 million. Well, now the next year he goes to salary arbitration again. He had a similar kind of year. And now it goes from $3.5 million to $5 million. And then the same thing happens after a fifth year. And then after a sixth year, they're granted free agency. So I think the owners are saying, oh, wait a minute, I'm just not even going to go to arbitration with a guy. Now, it might be some star prospect where you say, okay, they had a hiccup in their third year. They had a bad year. We're going to stick with this guy. But if he's just some guy that, you might be able to find from another team, and another team did the same thing with the same kind of player. So in essence, Thom Brennaman could have been that guy for the Reds. Ed, you might have been that guy with the Diamondbacks. And now we're just flip-flopping teams But instead of going to arbitration where the players were going to make a lot of money, all of a sudden the owners are getting that player for $1 million instead of $3.5 million, right? Same guy, but they're just flipping teams. So there are so many things they're not on the same page on where all this is going. And I just have a bad feeling about it. And it's already been sort of that progression has started the last year or two. COVID obviously threw some major wrinkles into the mix, but even this year. And look, if somebody from the Players Union was on the show right now, they could probably have very strong feelings and arguments that I wouldn't sit there and debate with them because they would know more about it than I do. But just the single fact this year that they couldn't agree that COVID numbers are going down in most places. I mean, they're really going down here in the Midwestern part of the country. Okay. And I'm not diminishing any of the deaths or the sicknesses. Please don't think that. I'm not at all. I'm saying for right now, though, the numbers are really starting to go down. The amount of deaths are going way down. The owners proposed to the players, let's start spring training a month later. You guys know all about this out in Arizona. They said, we're still going to play 154 games. We're going to pay you for 162 games. Okay? Well, I don't know about you guys, but I don't know what's a better thing in the world than working less and still making the same amount of money. I think it's a pretty good deal if you can find it. Because the players felt like, well, maybe Manfred could all of a sudden change this or change that they couldn't just sit down in a room and iron out some of that language to make that happen is beyond me. Because the way they're starting spring training this year, where you have no access to the players, there are going to be some fans in the stands, a couple of thousand here, a couple of thousand there. But as far as covering the teams and all that kind of thing, there's no access. Why not back it up a month and still get in 154 games in your full postseason play? I don't know why. And if they can't agree on that, then there are a lot of other hurdles besides that they need to clear if they're going to get through a new CBA.
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen those struggles and challenges throughout, not only this season that's starting up, which, started early on. So we're still left to see as the season progresses, what other challenges they will encounter. But going back to the last season and with COVID and the whole situation there, and even before that. And I think, with just bringing that insight of MLB at some point coming to a shutdown and this CBA, collective bargaining agreement, coming to an end here in December. Mm-hmm. And with what you just mentioned, Thom, I think it's inevitable and it's bound to happen because, I think it was a couple of seasons, maybe a little bit more than that there were rumors and thinking that, there's going to be a shutdown because they couldn't come to other agreements back then. So it seems like it's only getting closer, inevitable that it will happen maybe this season, maybe next season, or at the end of this season coming up or to next season. So just to clarify that. So I think, your insight is on something.
I hope I'm wrong. I really do, because I don't think at the end of the day, it doesn't do anybody any good. Number one, first and foremost, the fans. It doesn't do them any good because, you want to be able to enjoy your summer and make baseball a part of it. If you're a baseball fan, if you're a mom and dad, you want to take your kids to a game. If you can afford to go to a game a year or 2 games a year, whatever it is, take a date, take your wife, whatever, go with buddies. I mean, it's not good for the players. They're not going to get paid. It's not good for the owners. They're not going to get the money that they want to get, whether it's from selling tickets or local television rights or national television rights. It's just bad for everybody. And the longer that the sport stays off the radar, the further and further it has a chance to just slip out of people's minds. One of the things that really amazed me last summer was, remember when everybody was talking about, because of COVID, it shut down the NCAA basketball tournament, right? It shut down the NBA season for a long time. It shut down the hockey season and that kind of thing. And everybody said, boy, the television ratings when baseball finally starts back up, they're going to be through the roof. The next thing you know is the NBA gets its act together. They end up starting before baseball does, right? The NHL gets its act together. They get starting before baseball does. And by the time baseball starts, I think that there were a lot of people out there that said, well, I haven't had it for the last, 3, 4, 5 months, 3, 4 months, and maybe found something else to do. And I hope that doesn't happen again in 2022, where all of a sudden a work stoppage and, you potentially shut a sport down for weeks or months or even an entire year, it's kind of like that out of sight, out of mind. I really hope and pray I'm wrong.
I hope that doesn't happen because I'm a huge baseball fan.
Yeah.
So when MLB could not get their act together because of, with everything was happening with COVID, it was just, my withdrawals were so major, ask Ed.
Yeah, right.
So regular season, it's already as it is, and having that, imagine having an entire shutdown and not having baseball for an entire season, and my mind doesn't serve, is not working with me right now. The last time that actually happened, right. But I really hope it doesn't happen. Yeah, I don't know what I would do. So now we're talking some baseball. Let's go ahead and bring, talk a little bit of the transactions that have happened. Now, I wouldn't only even say the off season, because now it's spring training. The season's starting up, and there's some activity happen. I think maybe a little bit more, at least that I can recall, a little bit more than any other season. Go ahead, Thom.
I think that you have a little bit. I think what happens is, Joanna, sometimes is I think the big signings, they're splashy and they're newsworthy and they get big headlines and all that kind of thing. And I think we've seen some of those signings here recently, whether it's a player going to another team or whether it's, like you mentioned, Fernando Tatis Jr. in the contract he signs the other day. There are still, though, so many players that do not have a job. I mean, really good players that would make a difference in a team like the Arizona Diamondbacks, potentially becoming a contending team for a wild card spot. And those guys, much like they have the last couple of years, going back to what I talked about before, either a free agent who was thinking they were going to make too much money and teams decided they weren't going to pay him, or whether it was a player that was not offered salary arbitration and thus was given an unconditional release. There are a lot of really good players out there that are there for the taking. And I mean, here we are with pitchers and catchers already starting, and those players continue to sit on the sideline and wait for a phone call. And I'm not sure those phone calls are coming for a lot of these guys. I think you're going to start hearing a lot more about that as we start getting into games, and fans and those in the press start looking at their local teams and saying, well, wait a minute, where's that guy? Or where is that guy? Or why didn't we replace that guy? And I think that we're going to see a lot of that here in the next couple of weeks.
Thom, do you think the owners are just kind of being cautious, trying to play this wait and see game to see if we actually get this season started, if we try to get 162 in, or the owners just like, okay, we're just monitoring, we're just kind of waiting to see if this thing actually jumps off and we can actually get a full season going?
Well, I think you're seeing a little bit of both, to be honest. I think the overwhelming majority are doing exactly what you just said. They're saying, why would I go spend a ton of money when in a lot of places we don't know if we can have fans in the stands? Okay, so, we're not getting the ticket revenue again. We don't know if we're going to be able to sell hot dogs and peanuts and beer and, soft drinks and merchandise and all that other kind of stuff, which there was none of that last year. So there's the uncertainty of that part. Then you throw in, a team like the Padres, where they're faced with all those same questions all the other teams are faced with, but they've decided that, look, we know we're committed to paying our team to play. Right now, we think we're going to play. We don't know if there's going to be anybody in the stands. We do know we're going to get our full share of local television money, which we did not get last year. We're going to get our full share of playoff money and national TV money if there is indeed another full round of playoffs culminating in the World Series. And they're saying if there's ever a year to go for it, now's the year to go for it. And let's go out and spend a ton of money and bring in a ton of guys, which they have. And, of course, they're in the same division with the best team on the planet. So the Padres, they probably think that they can beat the Dodgers and win the National League West. And if you win the National League West, you could end up in the World Series. But most of the other teams are saying, we don't know about all those other things, so we're not going to go spend a fortune not knowing what kind of revenue stream we're going to have for our teams.
And Thom, do you think now, maybe as a result of what we're seeing this year and seeing those major contracts, those major signings, is this whether it's the teams or the players, a little bit of both, waiting that out, something that we'll probably foresee in the future, not seeing it as much during the off season, like in December timeframe and maybe January, but kind of leading into spring training, and what benefit could there be from either the organizations or the players itself?
Well, the only benefit is really all in I guess,